My mother-in-law lifted her glass and smiled at me like she had been waiting all night for the perfect moment to make me small. "Meet my daughter-in-law," Carol said. "She may wear the uniform, but she'd be nothing without my son." The table laughed. Then my husband laughed too. That was the part I remember most. Not the crystal chandeliers above us at the Broadmoor in Colorado Springs. Not the white roses on every table. Not even my 9-year-old daughter Lily squeezing my hand under the table so hard her little knuckles went white. It was Ryan laughing. We had been married 15 years. By then, I knew Carol didn't like me. I knew his sister Melissa thought I was too plain, too quiet, too army, too everything that wasn't her. But I had always told myself Ryan was different. That night proved I had been making excuses for a long time. It was Melissa's engagement dinner, and the whole thing looked like something out of a bridal magazine. Her fiancé Daniel Brooks came from a well-known military family. His father was a retired general. His mother wore pearls and thanked the waitstaff by name. Even the napkins looked expensive. I had worn a navy dress from Macy's and low heels because my left knee still complained when I stood too long. Melissa had texted me that morning, "Please don't wear anything military. This is my night." So I didn't. I left my service pin at home. I braided Lily's hair-packed emergency crayons in my purse and told myself we would eat dinner, smile politely, and leave by 9. For the first hour, that plan almost worked. Then Carol stood up. She made a toast to Melissa. She praised Daniel. She called the Brooks family the kind of people you pray your children marry into. Then her eyes landed on me. I felt it before she said my name. After her little speech about me being lost without Ryan, Melissa leaned forward and looked at Lily. Honestly, she said loud enough for the table beside us to hear that sweet girl deserves someone she can actually be proud of. Lily stared down at her plate. Something in me went still. I opened my mouth, but no words came. Not because I didn't have any, because I had too many. Then laughter moved through the room, soft at first, then bigger, like people were relieved someone else had decided what I was worth. And right in the middle of it, Daniel's father, General Thomas Brooks, pushed back his chair. He wasn't laughing. He was staring at me like he had seen a ghost. "Wait," he said quietly. The room settled. His face had gone pale. "Aren't you the army medic who pulled my son from that burning Humvee?" Nobody said a word. The ballroom that had been buzzing with laughter only seconds earlier fell so quiet I could hear the soft clink of silverware from another table across the room. General Thomas Brooks kept staring at me. He wasn't looking at me the way people usually did when they found out I'd served in the army. This was different. It was recognition. Slowly, he walked around the table. His wife, Margaret, whispered, "Tom." He didn't answer. Ryan shifted uneasily beside me. "Dad?" Daniel asked. "What's going on?" General Brooks stopped just a few feet away. His eyes dropped to my left wrist. I looked down automatically. The faded black paracord bracelet. I'd worn it every day for nearly 13 years. Most people assumed it was just an old bracelet. It wasn't. It had been braided from parachute cord by one of my fellow medics before our deployment ended. Almost everyone in our unit wore one. General Brooks swallowed hard. "I knew it," he murmured. Then he looked back at my face. "Were you stationed in Helmand Province?" I nodded once. "Yes, sir." "You were with the 10th Mountain Division Attachment." Another nod. "I was." His shoulders sank. "My God." Melissa let out an awkward little laugh. "I think there's been some mistake." Carol smiled politely. "There are a lot of women in the army. General Brooks never even looked at either of them. He kept his eyes on me. June 14th, 2012. The date hit me before the memory did. Dust. Smoke. The smell of diesel fuel. A radio screaming for medics. He took another step. My son's convoy was hit outside Sangin. Daniel slowly stood. "Dad," General Brooks raised a hand without taking his eyes off me. The lead Humvee rolled. Every image came rushing back. The fire. The ammunition cooking off. Someone yelling that nobody could get close enough. I hadn't thought about that day in years. Not because I'd forgotten. Because I'd tried not to remember. He spoke softly. "There was a young army medic." His voice shook. "She ran straight into the flames." Ryan looked at me. "What is he talking about?" I didn't answer. I wasn't sure I could. General Brooks finally asked the question that made my chest tighten. "Were you that medic?" For a moment, I wished the floor would open beneath me. I had never enjoyed talking about Afghanistan. Not with strangers. Not with family. Not even with Ryan. Especially not with Ryan. I'd come home hoping to leave those memories behind. Instead, I'd packed them away in a cardboard box in the garage with my deployment photos, my commendations, and a uniform I hadn't worn in years. I looked at General Brooks. Yes, it was barely above a whisper. I was there. His eyes filled with tears. You saved my son's life. The words landed on the table like a weight. Nobody moved. Daniel stared at me in complete disbelief. You... His voice cracked. You're Emma. I managed a small nod. I didn't know you remembered my name. I could never forget your name. Ryan slowly turned toward me. His forehead wrinkled. You never told me any of this? Before I could answer, General Brooks looked around the room. His voice became calm again. No, he said quietly. I don't believe any of you know who this woman really is. No one laughed this time. Not Carol. Not Melissa. Not even Ryan. For the first time that evening, every eye in the room was on me for a completely different reason. Daniel slowly pulled out the chair beside him and sat down, never taking his eyes off me. I've spent 12 years trying to remember your face, he said quietly. I never thought I'd actually see you again. No one spoke. Even the waitstaff seemed to sense something had changed. A server carrying coffee paused near the doorway before quietly turning around. General Brooks rested one hand on the back of a chair. I think everyone here deserves to know why I stood up. Carol forced a nervous smile. I'm sure this is all very interesting, General, but tonight is really about Melissa and Daniel. It is, he replied calmly, which is exactly why this matters. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. The entire room was listening. He looked at Daniel. Tell them what happened. Daniel took a slow breath. Our convoy was outside Sangin, Afghanistan, June of 2012. He glanced at me before continuing. We'd been on patrol most of the day. We were heading back just before sunset. I remember thinking about air conditioning. A few people smiled faintly. I'd promised my mom I'd call her as soon as I got back. He shook his head. Then everything exploded. The smile disappeared. The IED flipped our Humvee onto its side. Melissa blinked. EED. Roadside bomb, Daniel answered quietly. The engine caught fire almost immediately. He looked down at his hands. I couldn't move. The door was crushed. My left leg was pinned. There was smoke everywhere. The ballroom was so quiet I could hear the air conditioning humming overhead. Daniel continued. I remember hearing people yelling that the ammunition was starting to cook off. He looked at his father. They were trying to get to me. General Brooks nodded. But nobody could. Daniel turned back toward me. Then she showed up. Every eye shifted to me again. I didn't know her. I didn't know her name. All I saw was someone running straight toward the fire. I felt my stomach tighten. The memories were no longer locked away. I could smell burning rubber, taste dust, hear radios crackling over terrified voices. Daniel swallowed. She crawled through the passenger side because the driver's door was crushed. He paused. I remember telling her to leave me. A tiny smile crossed his face. She ignored me. A few guests laughed softly. She cut my seatbelt, dragged me across the dirt, then pulled me behind another vehicle just before the Humvee exploded. The room remained perfectly still. General Brooks quietly added, She didn't stop there. Daniel nodded. She treated me. Then she ran back. Melissa frowned. Back. He looked at her. There were still other soldiers trapped. Carol's expression slowly faded. Daniel continued. She helped 2 more men before anyone finally ordered her to get medical treatment herself. General Brooks looked directly at Carol. My son came home. Then he looked at me. Because she refused to leave him. I wished he would stop. Not because any of it was untrue. Because I had never wanted any of this to define me. I cleared my throat. It wasn't just me. There were a lot of brave people there. General Brooks smiled gently. That's exactly what a real hero says. I looked down at my untouched dinner. I was just doing my job. Daniel shook his head. No. His voice was steady now. You saved my life. Ryan stared at me as though he were seeing a completely different woman than the one he'd lived with for the past 15 years. And for the first time since we'd gotten married, I began to wonder if he had ever truly known me at all. Nobody touched their food. The steaks were getting cold. The mashed potatoes had lost their steam. Somewhere across the ballroom, a pianist quietly played Unchained Melody as if nothing unusual had happened. It felt like 2 different worlds. One was still celebrating an engagement. The other had just uncovered 15 years of silence. Ryan finally looked at me. Emma. His voice was barely above a whisper. Why didn't you ever tell me? I looked at him for a long moment before answering. I tried. He He frowned. No, you didn't. I let out a slow breath. Ryan, I tried more times than you remember. His face tightened. I told you after I came home that deployment changed me. You said everybody came back different. I told you I still had nightmares. You said they'd go away. I told you I hated fireworks. You bought 4th of July tickets anyway. Nobody spoke. Ryan looked down at the table. I wasn't trying to embarrass him. I was simply telling the truth. General Brooks quietly stepped back, giving us space. I appreciated that. This wasn't really about Afghanistan anymore. It was about everything that happened after. When we first got married, I continued, I showed you my medals. Ryan blinked. I don't remember that. I know. You said we'd look at them after dinner. I gave him a sad smile. We never did. His shoulders slumped. I wasn't angry anymore. That surprised me. Years ago I would have been. Tonight all I felt was tired. Carol suddenly cleared her throat. Well, she forced a laugh. I'm sure Ryan didn't mean anything by it. I turned toward her. No. She hesitated. You've spent 15 years telling people I'm married above my station. Carol shifted in her chair. I never said that. You've said it dozens of times. Melissa looked uncomfortable. I continued calmly. You've introduced me as Ryan's wife more times than I can count. You've never once introduced me as a veteran. Carol crossed her arms. That wasn't important. General Brooks looked at her. It wasn't. She looked away. I kept my voice steady. When Lily was born, I left active duty. I wanted to be home. I joined the Colorado National Guard so I could still serve. I started working part-time in the emergency department at Penrose Hospital. I thought I had a good balance. I smiled faintly. I loved my life. Then I looked at Ryan. I just wanted my family to respect it. His eyes filled with regret. I thought you didn't like talking about the Army. I stopped talking about it. I answered gently. There's a difference. He didn't have a reply. For years I'd packed away that part of myself because it seemed easier than explaining it. My uniforms stayed in garment bags. My commendations stayed in a cardboard box in the garage. The Bronze Star citation, the Army Commendation Medal, the photographs from Afghanistan, every one of them collected dust. Not because I was ashamed, because nobody at home seemed interested. General Brooks finally spoke again. I've met many veterans over the years. He looked around the room. The loudest ones usually have the smallest stories. Then he smiled at me. The ones who carry the heaviest burdens rarely bring them up. No one argued with him. Lily quietly slipped her hand into mine again. This time, I squeezed hers first. No one rushed to fill the silence. The engagement dinner had stopped feeling like a celebration. People who had been laughing just minutes earlier now avoided eye contact, quietly pushing food around their plates. A waiter walked by with a tray of coffee, paused when he sensed the mood, then quietly disappeared into the kitchen. Ryan rubbed both hands together. It was something he always did when he was nervous. I'm sorry, he finally said. His voice sounded small. I really am. I looked at him waiting. He kept going. I didn't know. General Brooks tilted his head. You didn't know what... Ryan hesitated. I didn't know she was involved in something like that. Daniel looked genuinely confused. You've been married 15 years. I know. And you never asked about her deployment. Ryan didn't answer. General Brooks spoke again, his tone calm but direct. You never wondered why your wife woke up during thunderstorms. Ryan looked down. You never asked why fireworks made her leave every 4th of July picnic. Still nothing. You never asked why she parked facing the exit wherever she went. Ryan swallowed hard. I thought. He stopped. You thought what? I asked quietly. I thought those were just habits. For a moment I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. They weren't habits, I said. They were reminders. The words hung between us. Daniel leaned back in his chair. I remember the hospital in Germany. Everyone looked at him. I only met Emma for a few minutes after surgery. His voice softened. She was sitting in the hallway with bandages on both arms. Ryan's head snapped toward me. Both arms. I nodded. I had second-degree burns. He stared. I never knew that. No. You never asked. He opened his mouth. Closed it again. General Brooks reached inside the pocket of his suit jacket. I've carried something for years. He unfolded a worn leather wallet. From inside, he carefully removed an old photograph. The edges were faded. He handed it to Ryan. Ryan studied it. In the picture, I was sitting on the tailgate of a military truck. My hair had been cut short. Both forearms were wrapped in white bandages. I looked exhausted. Daniel was standing beside me on crutches, smiling despite everything. On the back of the photo, someone had written, "The medic who refused to quit." Ryan looked up at me. "I've never seen this." "You've never looked." I didn't say it to hurt him. It was simply true. Carol suddenly spoke. "Ryan works hard." Her voice sounded defensive. "He provides for his family." General Brooks nodded politely. "Providing is important." Then he looked directly at Ryan. "But knowing your wife matters too." Nobody interrupted him. He continued. "I've been married 46 years. He reached for Margaret's hand. "I can tell you where she was on September 11th. Margaret smiled. "I know what scares her. I know how she takes her coffee. I know which knee hurts when it's going to snow." He paused. "And I know every scar she has." The room grew even quieter. General Brooks looked back at Ryan. "But somehow," he glanced toward me. "You never bothered to learn your wife's story." Ryan's eyes filled with tears. "I failed her." No one argued. Because for the first time that evening, he had finally told the truth. Ryan was still holding the photograph. He looked down at it again, then back at me like he was trying to reconcile the woman he'd married with the one standing beside a battered military truck halfway around the world. "I don't understand," he whispered. "I know," I said. General Brooks reached into the inside pocket of his jacket once more. "I didn't bring this tonight on purpose," he said. "I carry it almost everywhere." He unfolded a yellowed newspaper clipping carefully protected inside a clear plastic sleeve. "This came from the Gazette in Colorado Springs." He handed it to Daniel, who silently passed it around the table. The headline read, "Local Army Medic Honored for Saving Lieutenant During Afghan Ambush." Beneath it was a photograph I barely recognized. I was 29, sunburned, hair tucked under my patrol cap, trying very hard not to smile while a colonel pinned a medal onto my uniform. Melissa stared at the article. That's really you?" I nodded. "I didn't even know they ran that story." "They did," General Brooks said. "My wife clipped it out the morning it was published." Margaret smiled softly. "I've kept every article about the people who helped bring our son home." Daniel looked at the clipping and shook his head. "I remember asking Dad if he could find you. You disappeared." "I wasn't trying to disappear," I said. "I just came home." That answer seemed to confuse several people. General Brooks understood. "Many veterans do exactly that," he said. "They finish serving, go back to work, raise families, and rarely speak about what happened." He looked around the ballroom. "Hollywood teaches people that heroes like attention." Then he smiled at me. "Real heroes usually avoid it." Carol sat unusually still. For the first time since I'd known her, she had absolutely nothing to say. Melissa finally broke the silence. "If all this is true," she hesitated. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" I looked at her. "Would you have listened?" She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Ryan slowly placed the newspaper clipping back on the table. "I never even knew you received a medal." "I received a few." His eyes widened. "A few." I gave a small shrug. "They're in a storage box." "Where?" "The garage." He looked genuinely stunned. "They've been in our garage all these years." "Yes." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I thought those boxes were old camping gear." A couple of guests let out quiet, uncomfortable laughs. Not because it was funny, because it was painfully believable. General Brooks spoke gently. "Emma." I looked up. "Would you mind if I showed them one more thing?" I wasn't sure what he meant. He reached into his wallet again and unfolded a small certificate that had clearly been opened hundreds of times. At the bottom was my signature. Above it were a few handwritten lines from Daniel. I had completely forgotten writing them. Daniel cleared his throat. "I wrote that while I was recovering." General Brooks handed the paper to Carol. She read the first sentence aloud without meaning to. "Because of Sergeant Emma Carter, I'll get to hug my parents again." Carol stopped reading. Her hands began to tremble. No one looked at me anymore. They were all looking at her. For years she'd decided who I was before ever asking. Now she couldn't even finish reading the words written by the man whose family she had spent months trying so hard to impress. Carol sat perfectly still, Daniel's handwritten note resting in her lap. No one reached for dessert. The servers quietly cleared dinner plates, careful not to interrupt the silence that had settled over the ballroom. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the lights of Colorado Springs shimmered against the foothills. It should have been a beautiful evening. Instead, every person at our table looked like they were reconsidering everything they thought they knew. I felt a small tug on my sleeve. "Mom," Lily's voice was barely audible. I turned toward her. She was staring at me with wide, uncertain eyes. "Can we talk?" I smiled gently. "Of course." I pushed my chair back and knelt beside her. She wrapped both arms around my neck before saying another word. When Aunt Melissa said, she hesitated, that I deserved someone else, her voice cracked. I thought maybe she was right. My heart broke. I held her a little tighter. Oh, sweetheart. No. I brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Never. She pulled back just enough to look at me. Did you really save him? I nodded. Yes. Were you scared? I laughed softly. Terrified. That answer seemed to surprise her. I thought heroes weren't afraid. I smiled. Real people get scared. The important part is deciding what to do anyway. She thought about that for a moment. So, you were scared? Very. But you still helped. I did. She looked down at her little dress shoes. I think I would have been scared too. You probably would have. And that's okay. General Brooks quietly walked over, stopping a respectful distance away. Lily, she looked up. May I tell you something? She nodded. He smiled warmly. When my son came home from Afghanistan, he couldn't stop talking about one person. Lily glanced at me. He said there was a medic who refused to leave anyone behind. Daniel joined us. I asked around for months trying to find her. He chuckled softly. Nobody could. You know why? Lily shook her head. Because she went home. He looked at me. She didn't give interviews. She didn't write a book. She didn't ask for attention. She just went back to being a mom. Lily's eyes slowly filled with tears. That's my mom. Daniel smiled. Yes, it is. General Brooks rested one hand lightly on Lily's shoulder. Young lady, I've met a lot of brave people. Your mother is one of the finest I've ever known. Lily threw her arms around me again. This time she wasn't crying because someone had insulted me. She was crying because she finally understood me. Across the room I noticed Ryan quietly wiping his eyes. For years I'd wished he would see me the way General Brooks did. Now that he finally was, I wasn't sure it mattered anymore. Lily leaned back and smiled through her tears. I'm taking you to school for Veterans Day this year. I laughed. You don't have to. Yes, I do. She squeezed my hand. I want everyone to know you're my hero. I couldn't remember the last time I'd cried in public. But in that ballroom surrounded by strangers who suddenly knew more about my life than my own family ever had, I finally let the tears fall. People slowly returned to their seats, but the evening never recovered. The engagement dinner continued because it had to. Someone dimmed the lights. Dessert arrived. Coffee was poured. A photographer politely asked everyone to smile for a few family pictures. No one looked comfortable. Melissa's smile disappeared the moment the camera wasn't pointed at her. Carol barely touched her cheesecake. Ryan sat beside me without saying a word. Lily stayed close enough that our shoulders were touching. For years I had imagined what it would feel like if my husband's family finally learned the truth about me. I thought I'd feel victorious. Instead, I just felt exhausted. Daniel stood and tapped his glass. I know tonight was supposed to celebrate Melissa and me, he said. But before we finish, I'd like to thank someone who changed my life. He looked directly at me. Emma, if you hadn't come back for me that day, I wouldn't be standing here. He reached for Melissa's hand. I wouldn't have met the woman I love. His voice softened. I wouldn't have had the chance to build a future. The room remained silent. I've spent 12 years thanking God that someone ignored the danger long enough to save me. Then he smiled. And tonight I finally get to thank her in person. Everyone applauded. Everyone except Carol. She stared at the table. When the applause faded, she slowly stood. Emma, her voice shook. I owe you an apology. I looked at her. So does Ryan. Ryan lowered his head. Carol clasped her hands together. I've judged you unfairly. She swallowed hard. I thought you were quiet because you had nothing to say. I thought staying home with Lily meant you'd given up. I thought Ryan carried this family. She took a deep breath. I was wrong. For just a second, I saw genuine embarrassment on her face. But something still didn't feel right. I asked one simple question. If General Brooks hadn't recognized me tonight. Carol froze. She didn't answer. Neither did anyone else. I looked around the table. If none of this had come out. I paused. Would you still be apologizing? Carol's eyes filled with tears, but the silence answered for her. No, I said quietly. You wouldn't. Ryan reached for my hand. I gently pulled mine away. Emma, I'm sorry. I know. I should have defended you. Yes. I should have stopped Mom. Yes. I should have told Melissa to apologize. Yes. His shoulders slumped lower with every answer. Then he whispered the one sentence I'd been waiting 15 years to hear. "I failed you." I nodded. "You did." There was no anger in my voice, only honesty. He looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he simply stared at the floor. General Brooks quietly stood. "Mrs. Carter." I looked up. "I've learned something over the years. The hardest apology isn't admitting you're wrong. It's accepting that saying I'm sorry doesn't erase what happened." Ryan closed his eyes. Carol quietly sat back down. For the first time all evening, no one tried to explain away what had happened. No one blamed stress. No one blamed misunderstandings. The truth was sitting at the table with us, and for once, no one could laugh it away. The dinner ended just after 9:30. People gathered their coats, exchanged awkward goodbyes, and tried to pretend the evening had ended like any other family celebration. It hadn't. Lily was already asleep when I carried her to the SUV. Her head rested against my shoulder, and for a moment I stood in the cool Colorado night, breathing in the mountain air, before buckling her into the back seat. Ryan followed me outside. "Emma!" I didn't answer right away. I climbed into the driver's seat. He leaned down beside the open window. "Can we talk?" I looked past him toward the Broadmoor's front entrance. Guests were still leaving, laughing politely, avoiding our direction. "We've been talking for 15 years, I said quietly. "You just haven't been listening." He closed his eyes. I deserve that. Neither of us started the engine. The parking lot was almost empty now. "I never meant to hurt you." "I know. He searched for the right words. "I thought everything was okay." I looked at him. "Ryan, do you know what hurts the most?" He shook his head. "It wasn't your mother's comments. It wasn't Melissa. It wasn't even tonight." He frowned. "It was realizing that a complete stranger knew more about my life than my own husband." He lowered his head. "I can't change that." "No, you can't." The words came out softer than I expected. "I wish you could." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Ryan quietly asked, "Are you leaving me?" I stared through the windshield. The question had been circling my mind for hours, maybe years. I don't know. It was the most honest answer I had. I've spent so much time trying to make this marriage work that I don't remember what life looks like without trying. He nodded slowly. "I'll do anything. I believe you." He looked surprised. "You do?" "Yes, I believe you're sincere." I paused. I just don't know if sincerity is enough after 15 years. His shoulders slumped. Back inside the hotel, General Brooks stepped out through the front doors with Margaret and Daniel. He noticed us and walked over. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," I said. He smiled kindly. I wanted to say goodbye. Then his expression grew thoughtful. "My father used to tell me something." He slipped his hands into his coat pockets. "Respect isn't built in one grand moment. It's built in thousands of ordinary ones." He looked at Ryan. "And it disappears the same way." Ryan swallowed hard. General Brooks wasn't being cruel. If anything, he sounded sad. He turned back to me. "Whatever decision you make it because it gives you peace. Not because it makes someone else comfortable." I felt those words settle somewhere deep inside me. Margaret hugged me before they left. "So many military spouses and veterans spend years believing they have to carry everything alone," she whispered. "You don't." As their car disappeared down Lake Avenue, Ryan stood beside me in silence. Finally, I started the engine. The drive home took 20 minutes. Neither of us spoke. The only sound inside the SUV was Lily's soft breathing from the back seat. For the first time since we'd married, I wasn't thinking about how to save my marriage. I was thinking about how to save myself. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. For years, I'd been the first one awake in our house. Coffee at 6. Lunches packed by 6:30. Lily out the door by 7:30. Ryan usually left for his engineering office in downtown Colorado Springs just after 8. Our routines had always been dependable, comfortable. That morning, everything felt unfamiliar. I stood in the kitchen watching the coffee drip into my favorite mug while the house stayed unusually quiet. Ryan eventually walked in. He looked like he hadn't slept. Neither had I. He sat across from me without saying anything. After a long silence, he finally spoke. "I called my mom?" I nodded. "How did that go?" He rubbed his forehead. "I told her she owes you more than an apology." I waited. She cried. I wasn't surprised. Then he added, "I also told Melissa she crossed a line. And she said she was embarrassed." I looked into my coffee. Embarrassed isn't the same as sorry. No, it isn't. Another silence settled between us. Ryan looked older than he had just 2 days before. Regret has a way of doing that. Finally, he reached into his pocket and placed something on the table. It was a small brass key. The storage room. I frowned. What about it? I opened the boxes last night. My heart skipped. The military boxes, he nodded. I stayed up until almost 3. I read every citation, every certificate, every newspaper clipping. His voice broke. I found your bronze star. I looked away. I found the photographs. He paused. I found the letters you wrote home. I hadn't realized he'd opened those, too. I shouldn't have read them. No, you shouldn't have. I'm sorry. I believed he meant it. For the first time in years, I truly believed him. But belief wasn't enough anymore. After Lily left for school, I drove to Palmer Park. It had always been my place. Whenever life became too loud, I'd walk one of the trails overlooking Colorado Springs. The air was crisp. Pikes Peak stood bright against the morning sky. I found an empty bench and sat there for nearly an hour, not thinking, just breathing. Eventually, my phone rang.
It was General Brooks.
I hope I'm not bothering you. Not at all. I wanted to check on you. We talked for nearly 20 minutes, mostly about ordinary things. The weather, his vegetable garden, Lily. Before hanging up, he said something that stayed with me. Emma, sometimes the bravest decision isn't running toward danger. It's walking away from people who stopped valuing you. That afternoon, I met Ryan at a small coffee shop on North Academy Boulevard, the same place where we'd celebrated buying our first home. He looked hopeful when I walked in. I've been thinking, he said. So have I. He reached across the table. I gently folded my hands in my lap instead. I don't want to lose you. I smiled sadly. I think you lost me a long time ago. His eyes filled with tears. I'm willing to do the work. I know. And I hope you do. He looked confused. I took a slow breath. But you need to do it because it's the right thing. Not because you're afraid of being alone. He stared at me. What are you saying? I kept my voice calm. I'm taking Lily and moving into my sister's townhouse for a while. His face fell. I need space. I need to remember who I am when I'm not spending all my energy trying to be enough. He quietly nodded. There was no argument. No shouting. Just 2 people finally accepting a truth that had been waiting years to be spoken. As I walked back to my car, I realized something unexpected. For the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel like I was leaving my life behind. I felt like I was finally walking toward it. 3 months later, life looked very different. Lily and I had settled into my sister Claire's townhouse on the west side of Colorado Springs. It wasn't fancy. The living room was small, the kitchen cabinets needed repainting, and every morning we could hear Claire's golden retriever scratching at the back door before sunrise. But it felt peaceful. For the first time in years, I wasn't waking up wondering how to keep everyone else happy. I was simply living. I picked up extra shifts at Penrose Hospital and continued drilling 1 weekend a month with the Colorado National Guard. The routines that had once felt ordinary now reminded me of who I had always been, someone who cared for people without expecting applause in return. Ryan respected the space I'd asked for. He never showed up unexpectedly. He never pressured me. Every Friday evening, he picked Lily up for dinner. Every Sunday afternoon, he brought her home right on time. Little by little, he was becoming the father she deserved. Whether he could ever become the husband I needed, I honestly didn't know. Counseling helped us have conversations we'd avoided for years. Some were hopeful, some were painful. Some ended with both of us sitting quietly realizing that love and trust aren't always repaired at the same pace. One afternoon in November, Lily came home from school carrying a folded sheet of construction paper. "Mom," she said with a grin, "don't peek until tomorrow." Naturally, I wanted to, but I didn't. The next morning was Veterans Day. Her elementary school invited families for a short assembly in the gymnasium. Parents filled the folding chairs while children fidgeted in neat rows wearing red, white, and blue. When Lily's teacher called her name, she walked onto the little stage holding her paper with both hands. "My presentation is called," she said proudly, "My Mom is My Hero." I felt my throat tighten. Lily looked toward me and smiled. "My mom was an Army medic. She says she was just doing her job, but I think helping people is what heroes do." She paused, looking down at her paper. "My mom also taught me something after someone was mean to her. She said you don't become smaller because someone else refuses to see your worth. You just keep being who you are." The room applauded. I wasn't looking at the audience. I was looking at my daughter. Months earlier, she'd lowered her eyes when someone questioned whether she could be proud of me. Now she stood taller than I'd ever seen her. After the ceremony, General Brooks and Margaret surprised us by stopping by. Daniel had told them about Lily's presentation. General Brooks shook my hand. I had a feeling she'd grow into someone remarkable. I smiled. She's teaching me just as much as I'm teaching her. He laughed. That's usually how it works. As we walked outside into the crisp November air, Lily slipped her hand into mine. Mom. Yes, sweetheart. I'm glad you didn't let those people decide who you were. I smiled through tears. So am I. Looking back now, people sometimes ask if I got revenge. The truth is, not the kind they expect. I didn't ruin anyone's life. I didn't embarrass Carol on purpose. I didn't expose Ryan to make him suffer. The truth simply arrived before I ever had to defend myself. And once it did, everyone had to decide what kind of person they wanted to be. As for me, I finally stopped asking other people to tell me what I was worth. If today's story meant something to you, thank you for spending these moments with me. If you've ever had to rediscover your own value after someone failed to see it, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if you enjoy heartfelt stories about family courage and second chances, I hope you'll join me again. The end.